Merry meet and welcome. Today we're going to be taking on the Sims level 3 chocolate chip cookies and of course veganizing them. So for this I do think it's interesting that they're level 3, so definitely making them from scratch, even though you can find vegan cookie dough in stores, especially because it's like, and like even in like Safeway, it's like Lauren is the already pre-made cookie dough, so like if you want level 1 chocolate chip cookies you still could do that. Anyways, I'm like, it just doesn't exist in Sims. So we're gonna go ahead, be here, do it from start, and just have fun with it and kind of show some variations that you can use, because I don't know about you, but sometimes it's like really frustrating when you want a good chocolate chip cookie and you maybe don't have all the like ingredients that people call for in your house. So you already know we're playing around with the flax egg and the chia egg, but we're actually going to be doing applesauce. It's one of my favorite egg substitutes when it comes to baking, just because I love apples, and I just think it's a really nice simplicity one, because it also adds, we'll get into it later, but it adds the moisture to it, as well as being able to combine the ingredients together. So it's just a really great replacement. But let's start with our dry ingredients. So we have 2 cups of flour here. I'm just whisking to whisk it to show you that there's flour in there. And so we're going to be adding half a teaspoon of baking powder, as well as half a teaspoon of baking soda, and then half a teaspoon of salt. This part is optional. So this is about half a teaspoon of extra seasoning. There's a little bit of nutmeg, there's some ginger, and mostly cinnamon. If you're using like cinnamon applesauce for this, you maybe don't even need to include this and can just use it for that, or the cinnamon taste will come from your applesauce as well. But if you want to add a little bit extra to your chocolate chip cookie, you can. This is totally optional. You can play around with the spices. If you have like lavender or something like even more fun that you want to add and try out with, just half a teaspoon and add it into your dry ingredients. Of course, if it's wet, you'll add it to your wet ingredients, and possibly like if it's lavender extract, you might replace vanilla extract instead of, and just not have the seasoning at all. So this is half a teaspoon of dry seasoning, and then as always we just want to mix that together, because even though the portions are so oh my gosh, what is that word, essentially when they like really don't match each other, we still want to go ahead and blend it together. That way we just get all of that evenly distributed. And I'm gonna go ahead, just prepare ourselves, make a little bit of a well here, and we're going to set this off to the side. And then we're going to grab a new bowl for our wet ingredients. And then when it comes to wet ingredients, your sugar is always a wet ingredient, and it's because what happens when sugar gets heated up, it has a very low melting point, so it easily turns into liquid, and it doesn't help provide structure, unlike our dry ingredients. Those help provide structure to what you're baking. Sugar, on the other hand, is going to deflate that structure. So yeah, that's why we will go into it. Never mind. I'm gonna take a step back from that. But we're going to go ahead and use 1/3 cup of either vegan butter or some kind of neutral oil. You also can just use straight up coconut oil if you want it sweetened as well, and you're like trying to find like maybe about the wrong coconut oil and you're like, oh no, this was supposed to be refined so that everything didn't taste like coconut. Well, maybe you can add it here and enjoy it in these chocolate chip cookies. I like to if I'm using the butter, I like to cut it up a little bit so that I can mix it easier, because I don't have an electric mixer or stand mixer here, so we'll see how easy this mixing goes. And yeah, so that's 1/3 cup of fat, so whether you're using oil or a kind of vegan butter. I wonder if playing around with other fats, I wonder how it would go. Let me know if you have different kind of fats that you would like to test out and try. And then we're going to do a cup of sugar total, and I say total because I have half a cup of white sugar and then half a cup of brown sugar here, and this is my preferred ratio. So some people will say just brown sugar, other people will say it's okay to do it without any brown sugar, like they prefer it without. I'm a believer that brown sugar does make a difference, but I prefer the texture that comes from having half and half. So that's what we're gonna do here, is do half and half. And now we're going to do what's called creaming it together, and that's when you mix your sugars, blend them with your butter to where it kind of gets into like a bally texture, crumbly texture, just from these few ingredients. Another reason why it's really good to have this softened, your butter softened already too, especially if you don't have a mixer. It'll just make your life a lot easier and help it go a lot faster. Because we don't want any butter chunks, and it'll be amazing actually how much it'll mix together. And then we can already tell that our sugars are mixing together pretty well. It reminds me of a lot of like sand at the beach though, honestly. I don't know if it's just like the coloring or why, but yeah, so anyways. And obviously if you are using oil instead of butter, like this step is so much easier. I feel, again, it kind of goes back to that texture. There's just a difference between, like, I wish I knew more, like maybe I could actually study it and figure it out around having an oil versus just using butter and creaming it together with the sugar. And I don't know if it just means because, going back to like biology, but are the way that, like, one of the best ways to have things transported between cells to get through that semi-permeable membrane is using fats. So a lot of people remember like osmosis and how like that can enter from any area, but for the actual receptors where it can enter, it enters through using fat, and that's how like some of the ingredients come through, is through that fatty protective layer. So I wonder if that's why this kind of works, because even though the oil is still fat, the way that this works, it just really encapsulates those granules. So as we can see, it almost looks like cookie dough in itself, but this is just going to be our butter and sugars. And so now that we have those mostly creamed together, what we're going to do is continue adding in our liquids. So that's going to be 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, or again, if you're playing around with flavors, you can add like lavender extract or like honey or orange as well. If you're doing honey, so just think about the thickness too. That's one thing to just be mindful of. And then we're going to be doing a 1/3 cup of applesauce to replace our eggs in this recipe. Okay. And then that's it for our wet ingredients. So we'll just mix these, combine this together. I'm using unsweetened applesauce as well, so you can get cinnamon, unsweetened, or sweetened, and then it's really just allowing you to play around with that sugar intake as well as the cinnamon flavoring. So if you want more control over the flavoring, of course you can do the unsweetened, but yeah. So as we can see, this is kind of how it's going to look. Because the fat doesn't want to mix with the applesauce as much, because the applesauce, it has a lot of water in it. So that's why we kind of get like this. Oh, our oven is preheated at 350 to get this texture. And so that's the other thing too. If you're like, I only want to use 1 bowl, you actually start with your wet ingredients and then you can add your dry ingredients to this. But we already have our dry ingredients, so we quite literally are going to grab our other bowl and we're going to pour this into our dry ingredients, because that's honestly what I was taught, was that you always add, like by the Food Network, but you always add your wet ingredients into your dry. But for like 1 bowl recipes, it's also always a good thing where you want to cream your butter and sugar together first. So in order of operations, it's like kind of like the parentheses is creaming butter and sugar. You gotta do that first. Anyways, and then we'll just mix this. Of course, we're looking for a cookie dough, so it's going to we're going to really see how this batter like starts to stick to itself, and we'll have to be mindful about really incorporating, making sure all of it gets incorporated into each other. Ooh, this is when it is nice to have a stand mixer or electric mixer of some kind for sure. It's honestly kind of using like the same technique as when I cream the sugar together with the butter. Just kind of spreading out those wet parts so that more dry parts can adhere themselves. And then all right, so we're back, and so this is just about done, and then this is when you can add any of your toppings. So this is just a good base dough for a chocolate chip cookie. And yeah, and so like if you can add chocolate chips, if you want to add like nuts or seeds or anything else like that, you also can. We're doing about a cup, so I definitely would encourage maybe keeping it at a total of about a cup, not really going over that amount, because you don't want your dough to come apart due to how many ingredients it has. I'm trying to get it to where like you don't hear those loose chocolate chips anymore, which I guess could partially just be the back of the chips hitting it though, is now kind of what I'm saying. Okay, so I'm feeling good about this. Let's go ahead, grab our sheet pan and with our silicone mat and our cookie dough scoop, or ice cream scoop is what it actually is. Yeah, we all. So just super, one thing I love about chocolate chip cookies, again, so like I just somewhat had to get messy. If you're someone who like really doesn't want to, you don't have to, because I had to touch it only for my own spatula purposes, but otherwise you're able to just scoop them out straight into balls. I don't think they need to look nice or pretty in any shape or form, and just put them on your mat or your wax paper, whatever you're using. All right. We'll see how it goes. I probably could have given them a little bit more room, but at least it tastes good, right? See you guys soon. Merry meet again. So here we are with our finished cookie. So as you can see with this recipe, they don't spread out too much. They stay pretty much. So if you do want like super perfect cookies, you do want to make sure that they get a little bit more shaped within it, and you can always do that by just rolling them in your hands if you prefer that, but I'm not trying to please anyone. I just wanted these to be good looking cookies, and then of course we can break them apart. But yeah, so that's why I like to use half white, half brown sugar. I really don't have more to say. These are some good vegan chocolate chip cookies. I didn't really share where I got the chocolate chips from. I personally had to buy them on Amazon just because like where I live they were out of stock, but definitely encourage you to try like your Whole Foods stores and just look on the back of even in your baking aisle. Some of those chocolate chips, like certain brands, Enjoy Life is a good one I believe, where you can look on the back and you'll see if it has allergens in it, and you're just trying to determine if they've added a lot of milk to it or not, because chocolate in itself is vegan. So I'm gonna go ahead and enjoy some of these cookies, maybe share some, and I'll see you guys in the next one.